Hello there, welcome to TGI Extra this week. I've got a question from someone called Lester that's coming through the email on immigration. And Lester asks this: should the UK allow the Calais Jungle refugees to enter the country? And is there a difference between economic migrants and asylum seekers? So, very controversial. Likely to cause a flame war on Twitter. Fortunately, I don't have to answer it. I've got with me a pioneer minister here called Laura Whitmarsh. Laura's just visited Calais and she has come back with some insights, and hopefully through our conversation we'll be able to get a little bit more to the bottom of it. So, Laura,
hiya.
Thank you. Welcome to my office.
Great
to have you here. It's just been redecorated. So you've just been out to Calais. What did you see?
Yeah, I think I've been out to Calais twice, and both times were actually quite different to each other. The first time I went, I was caught off guard and a bit surprised really, because it was a place of creativity and hope. I hadn't quite expected that when I walked in. Full of entrepreneurship, with people setting up cafes and shops and youth clubs. And the second time I went was a bit more heartbreaking really. People were starting to lose hope, not really knowing where to go. People were starting to think that actually Calais might be a more permanent place for them to go, because they couldn't actually move out anywhere else. So that was sort of like the mood of it, but practically it was just quite, it looked like a slum really, is the only way I can describe it. Broken tents everywhere, makeshift fires. There were the few odd sort of like wooden buildings that people have made. Right in the centre was the church, which was absolutely fantastic, really, really beautiful, and a sort of place of first fruits really, where people came and bought their building materials. But overall, generally, you just got this sense of feeling that what's going on here isn't right. There was not enough sanitation, there were not enough toilets, there were not enough washing facilities, there was not enough water to go round, there was no kitchen, so there was nowhere really for people to eat, people to go to the toilet, people to shower, people to wash. And so as a result of that, actually, the last time I went, it was going to be on the verge of a typhoid outbreak, right. Because there was just sewage in the middle of the camp. Thankfully and amazingly, sort of most of those issues have sort of been sorted out, or on the progress of being sorted out, because of volunteers going in and pitching in, and partly as well due to I know Premier Christian Radio and Premier Youth Work, who've just done a massive project called Love Calais, in which they raised £40,000 for housing and buildings and those sorts of things, so that actually people could have that as a bit more of a stable, warm shelter and home for them.
And how big is the camp that you saw? Yeah,
it was quite large. It stretched all the way from the motorway and just underneath the bridge as you went down. Probably, I would say, half a mile to a mile wide. We're crammed full of 5,000 people, so it's not a lot of space really for the amount of people who are there. Recently though, they have significantly, that's the French government, have significantly reduced the size of that camp to just under a third. So 2/3 of the camp has been bulldozed, people's homes.
Right, and where do those people go?
Good question. Well, most of them just went to the north side of the camp. So in the north side of the camp, there's roughly 3,500 to 4,000 people living there now, in a third of the space of what it was. Otherwise, some have moved to Dunkirk, and there's a makeshift camp there that's even worse condition than Calais, because no NGOs and the French government are doing nothing there. But also there have been quite a few makeshift camps set up elsewhere, where hundreds of people have sort of pocketed themselves in and around Calais. So in reality, it's not moved them on to another country or done anything, it's just dispersed them and crammed them into a smaller space.
And did you get much chance to speak to people?
Yes, I did. It was amazing actually, gathering some of the stories and hearing some of the stories from people who were there. The majority of people that I spoke to actually were Sudanese or Syrian, and quite a few of them were political refugees who'd shared their stories about joining the army over in Khartoum or dying basically. If you went to university, your choice was you join the army, become a soldier, or you leave, because they didn't want people who were educated, especially young men, in and around. Other stories I heard were just absolutely horrific. I remember one really poignant story of when I was unloading my car and I had loads of aid to distribute from it. And a young boy came up to me and said, "Oh, can I have some shoes?" And I said, "I'm really sorry, I don't know if I've got any shoes your size." And he went away and he looked a bit sad, and I spoke to someone else. I said, "Oh, do you know who that lad is? I'd like to go and get him some shoes and bring them back." And it turned out that both his dad and his uncle had been killed in Afghanistan, and he'd travelled from Afghanistan to Calais by himself, this 12-year-old boy. And that really is just representative of some of the stories of people who are there. Others, there was an Iranian family who, not Iranian, they were Kurdish, and I remember the dad very clearly walking into the Women's and Children's Centre with a scar down his face, and sort of was like, oh, a bit intrigued, what's happened there? And it turned out that a bomb had hit his house, and he was physically scarred from this bombing. And he and his wife and his 3 children, who were 2, 4 and 6, had made it all the way from their home over to Calais on the backs of them and another family friend who was 21. And that was just devastating, the fact that you knew that someone's house had been blown up and yet they couldn't claim asylum anywhere because they'd lost all their documentation, all their passports, and so we're just stuck in Calais. And actually this is one of the families I sort of went home and really prayed about, because it troubled me that you'd have a 2-year-old walking from Iraq all the way over to France. And 2 days later they made it over to England in the back of a lorry, trafficked, unfortunately. But that was the only way that they could find some semblance of safety for them and their children.
I mean, the trafficking into the UK is horrendous. When I was a policeman, I remember very, very early one morning seeing a couple of heads bopping up and down the car park of the police station, and we went out to have a look, and we found these 2 Middle Eastern men kind of hiding, and our first thought was, well, you know, what on earth are they doing? And we went out there and we kind of grabbed them and kind of hauled them into the police station, and it turned out that they were 2 Iranian men who had been trafficked over to the UK. And what happens is, because lorry drivers over here get punished if they are found with immigrants in the back of their lorry, he found them. They hadn't eaten for over a week. He beat them both up because they were both weak and slung them out at the side of the road and just carried on his journey because he didn't want to be in any trouble. And of course you had these 2 poor gentlemen who were starving. They couldn't speak the language. They're in a completely strange country. They were actually quite terrified of the police, which is why they kind of tried to hide, but they came to the police station anyway because they just didn't have any clue of how they could get any help, so they thought they'd risk coming to us. Unfortunately, when they did and we realised what had gone on, they weren't criminals or they weren't trying to plant bombs or under our police cars or what have you, which we didn't really think, but you never know. And once we settled them down a bit and we heard their story through an interpreter, we were able to help them. But it is a serious issue, this whole trafficking thing, isn't it? So this kind of leads to the next question, really. What can we do to help? Because the Church of England and most of us clergy believe that we need to be taking a lot more people into the country, the kind of people you describe who want help. What can we do?
I think there's so many different tiers of what we could do, right from the bottom base level, sort of as Christians, just praying. And then I think there's sort of a next sort of level where so you pray and then you go out and you could help there over in Calais or elsewhere at the other camps. And there's quite a lot of stuff that could be done there, really. There's massive warehouses where all the distribution stuff needs to be sorted out, all the clothes, all the food needs to be sorted before it goes over to the refugees through the charities that work there. The other way of helping is just going and hearing some of the stories, bringing them back, breaking the sort of myths and the fears and the stories that sort of go round that perhaps prevent some of us from offering a hand of hospitality and instead putting up these walls because we're scared of what we might face and what we might encounter. Then I think there's sort of a political level really that we can engage on. So locally it might be writing to your MP or writing to 10 Downing Street or protests and all of those, sort of getting your voice heard and out there. And I think that's quite an important one, because actually unless something changes at a governmental structural level, it's going to be really difficult and really hard for these refugees to be welcomed in, or those who are economic migrants or whatever it might be, because the structures just aren't in place to welcome them. So no matter how much we might want to just have someone come and just share a room with us, which would be an amazing extension of hospitality, then you've got to think longer term around healthcare and schooling. And
I agree,
all of that
and we
kind of
have
thing.
to be completely radical, don't we? I think we need, as a society, to almost rearrange the furniture of how we run our society in order to be a place of hospitality. But whether we can make the case for that, and whether the government would ever be willing to allow that to happen, I just don't know. We've kind of run out of time. I wanted to talk a bit about the whole economic migrant and asylum seeker differences. That was part of the question, but we did discuss earlier, and we kind of both agreed, didn't we, that when people are looking for a better life, that's not a reason to shut them out, is it? No. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me. This conversation wasn't to start a flame war on the internet, but it is a controversial one. You're going to have different views, and Christians can hold to different views on most things. So let's have the conversation. Let's have it graciously towards each other, and we'll see you on the next episode.